Howdy my totally tubular gamers, we're back with another video.
Well, 2024 really is wrapping up here. The year is just about over, and with that I've started reflecting on the entire year as a whole. Looking at all the things I've done, all the places I've gone, all the games I've played, and one topic that stood out to me when I was looking over all of the games I've played in 2024 is, what about all of the retro games I've played? I have mostly stuck to just newer games this year. I would actually say that like 90% of the games I played in 2024 came out in the last year or two, but there was a good amount of retro games that I actually played as well. And for clarification, I consider anything older than 2014 to be retro. So for today's video, I thought I would share with you all the retro games I played in 2024. I'm not going to be giving these games full-blown reviews or anything like that. I'm just going to briefly go over them and share my thoughts. This list is in order from when I played these games, starting all the way back in January of this year. I'm also including games that were remastered. If that original release came out 10 plus years ago but it was remastered here in 2024, well, I'm gonna include it. As always with my videos, you can let me know how you're feeling down below. I'd love to know what retro games everybody else played. Let's get a discussion going. I'm always lurking down there. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Let's get to the retro games. So the first retro game I played in 2024 is probably not one you would expect. It was Snipar Ghost Warrior 2. Now, I got Snipar Ghost Warrior 2 way back when, like 10 plus years ago. It was still pretty new when I got it, but I never actually beat it. I got about halfway through it, and I'm guessing I just dropped it for other games. Anyway, it was early January of this year when I was looking through my Steam library, saw it, and was like, you know what, I should just sit down and finally finish this game. And so that's exactly what I did. I played another 2 or 3 hours of it, and I finally finished Snipar Ghost Warrior 2 after all of these years. And I gotta say, it's actually pretty good. While this series is very up and down in its quality, Ghost Warrior 2 is actually a pretty good one, where it really is just all about you being the sniper, where you get to go into these really high up positions and do very long shots. And it is actually set in modern day. It features a pretty generic military storyline that just kinda goes nowhere. And while at times the game can feel rather generic, I actually still had fun with this one. I'm not gonna act like it's anywhere near as good as the Snipar Elite series, which is clearly its main competition, but I still thought it was pretty decent even all these years later. There are some cool set pieces, you go to some nice locations, the stealth ain't half bad, and the game actually looks pretty good even nowadays. It ran on the Crytek engine, and yeah, nowadays it still does look alright. I'm not going to act like this was a mind-blowing experience or one of the best first-person shooters I've ever played, but it was a lot better than the first Ghost Warrior. Maybe in 2025 I'll play Snipar Ghost Warrior 3 or one of the contract games. I don't know, I've always been pretty iffy on this series. I'd much rather play Snipar Elite, and there's a new Snipar Elite coming out in 2025, so I'll be playing that for sure. But Ghost Warrior 2, it was alright. So the next game we got here is Super C, the second Contra game. So in 2024, there actually was a new Contra game, Operation Galuga, that ended up being pretty decent, but in preparation for that new game in my eventual ranking video, I wanted to make sure I had actually played through all of the Contra games, and I realized that I had actually never played all the way through Super C, so I sat down and played through Super C. It wasn't more than like an hour, but it was still a fun little run and gun shooter. I'm not going to act like it's one of the best Contra games of them all, and it doesn't hold a candle to Contra 1 or 3 in my opinion, but yeah, it was pretty decent. The controls were alright, the levels were okay, the challenge is absolutely on point. This game whooped my ass and then some. But I feel like it's always fun to sit down and play a retro run and gun shooter for like an hour or two. I play so many complex modern games these days. It's really nice when I get to play something as simple as this, where it's just dodge everything on screen and shoot everything. The game absolutely has its moments. While I wouldn't say it's anywhere near as memorable as several other Contra games, it certainly wasn't a bad game. It was just alright. I did play this on the Contra Anniversary Collection, which I got many years ago, and this seems to be the definitive way to play a bunch of the older Contra games. It's super cheap and it's widely available, and at the end of the day, I still had fun with the game, and that's all that really matters. So here we have maybe the strangest retro game I played through in 2024, and that is Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. I played the remaster by Limited Run Games. I'd never actually played the game up until this point, and yeah, it certainly was an entertaining experience. This game is pretty infamous for being one of the worst video games of all time. I mean, it's barely even a game. You really just interact with some menus and watch some stills and listen to the acting. and none of it, like none of it is good at all. The acting's terrible, the storyline's stupid, the pacing is just god awful in this game. They just keep talking and talking. The images don't even make any sense half the time. There's very little redeeming qualities with this game whatsoever. It's pretty bad through and through, but man, This shit is so entertaining. It's one of those games that is so bad that it becomes good, and this remaster actually has a lot of love and care put into it. The resolution's been buffed, there's a bunch of special features, and behind the scenes you can actually play this new little game they introduced where you walk around this maze finding bonus features. You can freely select whatever scene you want, so you can go back and see the scenes you actually want to see instead of all the other boring shit that doesn't matter. It's easily the definitive way to play such a horrible, horrible game, but man, I was laughing my ass off the entire time. I had a pretty good time with it, I don't care how much it sucks. This really was the remaster I didn't know I needed, but I'm so happy this game is in my collection. So Super C wasn't the only retro Contra game I played through this year. I also sat down and played through Contra 3. Before Operation Galuga came out, I was like, you know what? I really should try Contra 3 again. It's been well over 10 years since I played through it. I'm gonna just sit down for an afternoon and play through it, and yeah, that's exactly what I did. And I gotta say, all these years later, Contra 3 The Alien Wars still slaps. This is like the best Contra game of them all. It really is one of the best run and gun shooters ever. The controls are great. You start with a good ass machine gun instead of this tiny little pea shooter. You go through some of the best levels of any run and gun shooter. There's a bunch of awesome set pieces and moments. The bosses are absolutely on point. You get some kick-ass weapons. The game is hard as fuck, but it really is satisfying. When you overcome some of these challenges, you feel like a certified badass. Not every level is amazing, some are definitely better than others. The top-down ones can kind of eat my ass, but this game was just fun, pure and simple. It still looks good nowadays, the music is great, and it really is just a great time. I ended up eventually playing through Operation Galuga, and I ranked all of the Contra games, but man, Contra doesn't get much better than Contra 3. I also played this on the Anniversary Collection, and I believe that's the best way to play this game. So one retro series I was playing through in 2024 was the Ace Attorney series, and that started here with Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. In January I got the Apollo Justice trilogy, and slowly played through the 4th Ace Attorney game, and this was actually the very first Ace Attorney game I had ever played. I had seen plenty of clips and memes of the series, but actually sitting down and playing one of these games myself, yeah, it had never happened until I played this one, and I think it was pretty decent. I certainly think lesser of it now that I've finished a few other Ace Attorney games, but I still liked Apollo Justice. The first case is really great in this game, and then the other ones, yeah, they're just not as good, but that first case is really excellent, and it really sets the stage for how crazy this entire series can get. I'm not the biggest visual novel guy. I like the Danganronpa series, but that's really it. I gotta say though, this game absolutely did hook me at a few times, and there was nothing else I wanted to play during certain moments. The gameplay is pretty simple in this game. You're just kind of watching the characters talk and occasionally solving a minor puzzle or interacting with the environment, but that's okay because the story and the characters really do carry this entire game. The drama's there, the game's got plenty of funny moments, and while Apollo certainly is no Phoenix Wright, he's still a good character in his own right. Pun intended, I guess. And like I mentioned, I played this on the Apollo Justice trilogy, and this seems to be the definitive way to play these games going forward. The resolution's bumped, there's some quality of life features, and some little extras here and there. But this would just be the first Ace Attorney game of many that I played this year. So one retro game I played through this year that probably seems pretty random is Kingpin Life of Crime. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this one, it is an old school first-person shooter that came out in the late 90s, and it's really considered a cult classic, especially in certain FPS circles. Now, I don't know if you remember, but Kingpin actually got a remaster in 2023, and I was pretty excited for this because I had never actually played the game, but then I heard just terrible things about the remaster and that I should stick with the original, so I didn't end up getting the remaster, but I was like, you know what, I think it's finally time I play through Kingpin, and a few months later, I did finally play through Kingpin, and I gotta say, this is actually a pretty good first-person shooter. I can see why so many people like it. It's rather different from most shooters that came out in the 90s. It certainly was post-Half-Life, where there actually is a bit of a story, characters, world building, and you're not just mindlessly shooting everything that moves. You actually get to do quite a bit more than that in this game, and I found it enjoyable for the most part. When you start the game, it can actually be pretty challenging, and the shooting in this game can feel rather iffy at times, but I still think the combat was decent, and I had fun exploring these areas. The levels aren't super straightforward and linear, you actually do have to do some exploration, and I thought that was pretty cool. The game certainly has a look and atmosphere going on that actually holds up pretty well, and when it comes to retro first-person shooters I played this year, I think this was one of the best. If you haven't tried it, but you like retro FPS games, maybe consider Kingpin. Play this original version, it gets pretty cheap and it actually works very well on modern systems. So from one FPS to the next, here we have the game Strafe. Now, I remember when this game came out, people were pretty disappointed by it. I remember the game actually had a Kickstarter and everything. It was marketing itself as a throwback shooter that would be very similar to, say, the older Doom games, but then the game actually really isn't all that much like older FPS games. It plays more like a FPS roguelike. And then the game just got kind of forgotten. But I was going through my Steam library one day, looked at it and went, you know what, I should finally sit down and play through this game. I bought it like 10 plus years ago. So yeah, I sat down and played it for like 5 hours and I was able to actually finish it. It's kind of funny looking back. When Strafe came out, people were really craving an old school first person shooter. They wanted boomer shooters back, and this game was absolutely not that. But here we are like 10 plus years later and we have more than enough boomer shooters to choose from. And I'm really glad to see that type of FPS return, because that's my favorite type of FPS. Strafe really isn't much like a boomer shooter. Like I said, it's more like a roguelike first-person shooter. You do runs, there's a bunch of randomly generated elements like the level design, what weapons and upgrades you get, abilities, etc, etc. I was able to finish the game in just a few runs, and each run can actually get pretty lengthy, a good like hour and a half if you're really taking your time, but I still did have some fun with it. I'm not going to act like this is a great FPS. Even all these years later with a bunch of updates, the game is still just okay, and I'd have a pretty hard time recommending it, but I'm glad that I finally sat down and played through this one. It had been sitting in my library for quite some time. So this one probably seems pretty random, but I finally played through Double Dragon Neon this year. I bought this game over 10 years ago, but just never played it, so it was good to check this one off the backlog. I was actually planning on doing a Double Dragon ranking video, and I was looking over the entire series only to realize I'd never actually played Neon. And went, okay, I gotta fix that, so I got a buddy to play through it with me, and yeah, this was a pretty fun beat 'em up. I know not everybody loves Neon, but man, I love this game's style, how crazy it got, and I thought the combat was actually pretty good in this game. Like, there is a little bit of depth, it doesn't go insane like Double Dragon Gaiden, but this was a solid 2 hours of fun. The music is also really great in this game. Like, the music really does slap in this game. I like the game's presentation, its attitude is absolutely all over the place, and it feels more like a parody of Double Dragon, but I still found it very entertaining. I believe that this really is one of the best Double Dragon games. I was working on the Double Dragon ranking until I saw that they announced a new one, and now they've even announced a release date for it, so I'm going to be cooling my jets for a bit and we'll just wait for the new one to come out. But know this, Double Dragon Neon really is one of the best in the series. Don't let the weird attitude put you off, it still is a pretty good game. One retro game I played through this year was one that I've played through many times, and that was Super Mario Sunshine. I played this one with my partner, and all these years later, this really still is one of my favorite games of all time. I grew up with Super Mario Sunshine. I know a lot of its secrets like the back of my hand, and it was really great to experience it all over again. It had been a few years since I had last played it, but I played it on the Switch via the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, and I think this is a great way to play the game. It's a shame that Nintendo stopped making more copies of this game or selling it digitally, but that's a discussion for a different day. This is a great way to play the game, and all these years later I still think the game is fantastic. Yeah, it's a lot more linear than 64 and Odyssey, and it has plenty of moments that make me want to rip my hair out, but I still think Sunshine is a very good game. The world, setting, and general atmosphere is actually pretty great. I love it all these years later. I feel incredibly nostalgic for it. I still listen to the music pretty regularly. And I love just how different Sunshine is from really any other 3D Mario game. The controls are still buttery smooth, there's still plenty of great shine sprites to get, and as long as you're not 100%ing it, I think you're gonna have a really great time with this one. And then the fucking blue coins show up, or one of the annoying ass moments where you don't have FLUDD, and we could be here all day complaining about Sunshine's issues, but for the most part, I really do love Super Mario Sunshine, and it was great to sit down and play through this one again. So I did play a few racing games this year, but the best one I played by a landslide is Ridge Racer 2, which originally released for the PSP, but it was eventually re-released on the PS5, which is the version I played, and I gotta say, this game slaps. This is not only like the best Ridge Racer game, but one of the best racing games I've ever played. It has like all the content from the prior Ridge Racer games all mashed together to create just a delightful experience. It has maybe the best controls of any Ridge Racer game as well. It feels so good to drift drift in this game, and you actually get to go really fast. It has all the tracks you know and love from this series, it has all the music, it has a bunch of new stuff as well. Like, this game has a ton of content to it, more so than like any other Ridge Racer game, and it was all really good. It was just a whole lot of fun. Once I started playing it, this was all I wanted to play for like a day or two because I was just having that great of a time with it. It has been too long since I've played any other arcade racers. We rarely get any arcade racers nowadays, and that's a real shame because when they're good, they're really good, like Ridge Racer 2. Now I'm a bit closer to that Ridge Racer ranking video, but man, I don't know how any of them are going to beat Ridge Racer 2 on the PSP. It's just really great. So another remaster that came out this year was the Tomb Raider 1 through 3 remastered collection. And I gotta say, this is one of the coolest remasters of 2024. There was a lot of remasters that came out this year, but this Tomb Raider one is actually pretty sick. As somebody who had never messed around with the older Tomb Raider games, I think this was really cool. It's cool how you can switch between those original graphics and these newer graphics that make it look more like a PS2 game. There's a bunch of quality of life improvements here. Saving is a lot better than those original games. This really is just like the definitive way to play the older Tomb Raider titles. While I'm still playing through these, I have enjoyed my time with them. These games certainly have aged though in several aspects, not just with the controls and the presentation, but like the structure of the game itself, the movement, the jumping. It just takes a bit of time to get used to, but it's nothing terrible. It's not anywhere near as bad as some other people will have you to believe. I think it's pretty cool they remastered the first 3, and it's even cooler that they're remastering 4, 5, and 6, which aren't even the most beloved Tomb Raider games. I'll be sure to pick those up as well, and hopefully I'll get to this entire series. I know a lot of people have wanted me to rank the Tomb Raider games, and I just haven't played enough of them to do a ranking. So for this part, I'm combining a few games, but you'll understand why shortly enough. Around early August, I really just got a hankering for Cars, and for my birthday, I actually got Cars 2 on Xbox 360 and a Lightning McQueen cake, and so I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to sit down and play all of the Pixar car games and rank them all, and that's exactly what I did. So I sat down and played through Cars 2, Cars Mater National, Cars Race-O-Rama, and then Cars Radiator Springs Adventures, and these were all of varying quality. Of these 4 games, the best was easily Cars 2. This is actually a pretty good game. It's surprisingly good. It's way better than the movie. It's a solid little kart racer with a decent amount of depth. Cars Race-O-Rama is a fun little racer, but it doesn't really have all that much going on. It certainly is better though than Cars Mater National. That game was just kind of whatever. And then Radiator Springs Adventures is like an activity center for small children. I realized really quickly I'm probably not the target demographic for this one. I had fun playing through all of these games. They're all really short, like under 5 hours, so I was able to play through them all pretty quickly. And yeah, it felt kind of good finally trying those Cars games that I had seen on the shelves for many, many years, or at flea markets nowadays. I remember when like Mater National came out, or Race-O-Rama, and seeing them at Toys R Us and wondering if it was even as good as that original Cars game. I didn't play the original Cars since I've played through that game several times now. I grew up with that game, but I gotta say that game has actually aged pretty decently. All of these games outside of Radiator Springs Adventures has aged decently, but the only one I can really recommend from this bunch is Cars 2. Like I said, it is actually a pretty decent game. I since have ranked all of the Cars games. You can check that video out. I had a lot of fun doing that. It was just something random I did in August. Sometimes you get those feelings where you just want to play something and you don't have the most rational reason why, and that was the case with me and Cars. So another retro series I played some games from this year was the Splinter Cell series. I had a patron reach out and ask me to rank all of the Splinter Cell games, and I told him, yeah, I'd absolutely love to rank the Splinter Cell games. I had played a few of them in the past, like the original, Pandora Tomorrow, and Conviction, but one that I had never touched at all was Chaos Theory. I finally played through Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and I gotta say, this was one of the best games I played all year. This is like one of the best games I've ever played. I am not exaggerating here. This is a fantastic stealth game that really excels in every possible way. I did eventually rank all of the Splinter Cell games where I go really in depth with why I love Chaos Theory, but man, this game just gets everything right, from the atmosphere, the presentation, the stealth mechanics, the story, the level design. Man, the missions are so good in this game. They're all very different from each other. They're all memorable. They're well made. And the game just does such a great job at making you feel like a complete badass, where you're just totally hidden, you're in the shadows, nobody can find you, and it feels like very few other stealth games make you feel this awesome in darkness. This is like the best of the Splinter Cell series, and I could not believe just how good this game is. It's also aged incredibly well, and in my opinion, it really is one of those must-play titles for anybody. Even if you don't really like stealth games, this one might win you over. It's that good. But it wasn't the only Splinter Cell game I played through this year. I also played through Splinter Cell Double Agent, which certainly was a step down, but it was still alright. There's two versions of this game and they're actually pretty different from each other. I'd say the non-HD version is actually better than the HD version, but if you want to know exactly why, again, you can check out my Splinter Cell video where I go really in depth with the entire series actually. I gotta say, Double Agent has plenty of good ideas, but it doesn't feel like they were all that well executed. The whole trust system really just isn't that well implemented in either version, and it feels more ambitious than actually realized. At the very least, there are some good missions in this game, while there are plenty that I think are just completely out of place for Splinter Cell, like when you're in the war zone. There are some good missions here, and there are a few times where it does kind of feel like Chaos Theory. The story was kind of cool at least, and there actually is a pretty shocking ending here, but for the most part, I found Double Agent to be an average to middling experience, really no matter which version you're playing. But whatever you do, if you're gonna play this game, stay as far away from the PC version. That is just a rancid version of Double Agent. That PC version is god-awful. So here we got another Ace Attorney. We have Ace Attorney Investigations 1. I did get the Ace Attorney Investigations collection, and while I could have both games on here, I'm counting the second one as a new game since it had never come to the West until this year. But the first game, oh yeah, that's fair game as a retro game. This game really establishes the formula that the second game absolutely perfects. It sees you playing as Prosecutor Miles Edgeworth, and it is actually decently different from the main Ace Attorney series. You have to do like real-ass investigations where you gotta piece together all of your evidence and make claims, call people out, etc, etc. You also get to just freely walk around these crime scenes, and it's actually pretty cool. It's more like an adventure game. There's some good cases in this game, there's plenty of funny moments, there's drama, and a few good plot twists, but I won't lie, all of the cases in Investigations 2 are way better than anything this first game has. Even at its very best, this game cannot hold a candle to the second one. It feels like they were really just getting their feet wet with this one, really figuring out how this gameplay style would work, and then they put all of their effort into the second game. I would still recommend the game though, there's plenty of good moments, and it really does set the stage for Investigations 2. But I won't lie, after I finished Investigations 2, I looked back at the first one and went, that one was just alright. It was still a good experience and it was a solid like 20 hours, but things drastically improved with that second game. I will say the Investigations collection is pretty awesome though. This is about as close to a remake of this original game that we'll get. It's got a great user interface, some quality of life improvements, special features. Like Capcom really killed it with the Ace Attorney collections this year. So there was actually a third Splinter Cell game I played through this year, and that was Splinter Cell Blacklist, which is unfortunately still the latest in the Splinter Cell series. It's been over 10 years, and Sam Fisher has not come back for his own new game. Yeah, he did have a cameo in Ghost Recon, and there's a show coming and all that, and eventually a remake allegedly, but it's been just way too long since we had a new Splinter Cell game. I think Blacklist is pretty good. It's a step in the right direction. I'd much rather play Blacklist over Conviction or Double Agent, but it really doesn't hold a candle to some of the older Splinter Cell games. I'd rather play any of the three originals over Blacklist, but Blacklist does have plenty of good moments. I like how they really let you customize how you want to play the game. You can go full Panther mode and just go on a killing spree like you would in Conviction, or you can play it like the older games and try to be pretty stealthy, which is what I did. There's a few things I don't love about Blacklist, like how you upgrade the gear and really all of the daytime missions, but there's plenty of awesome missions and moments in this game. There's some really good set pieces, and I like when you're at night, and it actually does feel like the older Splinter Cell games. The game also still looks pretty good, even nowadays. There's even multiplayer that people are still playing to this day. I'm not going to act like this is an incredible stealth game or one of the best I've ever played, but I still thought it was pretty good, and it's a real shame we really don't get any stealth games in the AAA scene anymore. Outside of Hitman, stealth games are just totally gone in the AAA scene. We've really only got indies propping up the stealth genre at the moment, but I'm hopeful that changes in the future. Stealth games really need to make a comeback. They were pretty fun, and I think Blacklist was fun too. So one remaster I was pretty excited to play through this year was Sam & Max The Devil's Playhouse. This is a remaster of the third Telltale Sam & Max game that released originally in 2010, and it's one of the best games in the entire series. And this is actually a really great remaster. It is very high quality, it improves the graphics by quite a bit, it fixes all the lighting issues from the original, it tweaks the interface a little bit, and it's just the definitive way to play this game. There is no reason to ever play the original again, which in my opinion means it's a great remaster. And this is still a great game. It's still hilarious. It's an awesome adventure game. It has a wonderful story. It's actually pretty dark even for Sam & Max, but there are so many great moments to this game. and I still can't get over just how original this game is all these years later. I played through it with my partner who had never experienced this game, and they absolutely loved it. I still love this game, and it really is one of my favorite adventure games of all time. I do kinda like the second season of Sam & Max a little bit more, but the Devil's Playhouse, it really is very good still. It's also the most ambitious Sam & Max by far. If you've never even heard of Sam & Max, I recommend the entire series, but just know that the Devil's Playhouse, oh, this one gets pretty crazy. Alright, so here's another Ace Attorney game, and this one is Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. So this is the second game in the Apollo Justice trilogy, and I started this game way back in like March or April, right after I finished Apollo Justice, but I very slowly played through this one, and at one point dropped it to play through Investigations 1 and 2, but eventually around fall time, I picked it back up and cranked through it. I think Dual Destinies is a good game, but it certainly is the weakest Ace Attorney game that I've played so far. There are plenty of good moments, and the last case is actually pretty awesome in this game, but some of these cases really dragged on, man, especially the second and third case. Like, it just took forever for those cases to finish. I was on them for like 3 or 4 hours a piece, and it felt like it was just taking forever. I like that the series moved to 3D, and I think the 3D animation and art is actually pretty good. And the gameplay certainly feels a bit more refined than the prior games, but man, shit was just moving slow in this game. I did also play the DLC case, which actually is pretty good. That one is really funny. But overall, I would just say that Dual Destinies is alright. It's also a really long game. It took me over 30 hours for this one, and I don't know if it was totally worth it. I know some people do like this game, but I was just a bit more mixed on it. It still is a good time, it's just, yeah, the other ones are better. We're keeping things Capcom themed here, and so here we have the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. I can't believe this is real. We wanted MVC2 back for so long. Free MVC2 had been trending forever. Capcom actually listened to us and not only brought back MVC2, they brought back every Marvel fighting game and even the Punisher beat 'em up game. And I gotta say, it really is glorious. This is not only the best way to experience these games, but it's really great to see them all available on modern hardware. These are some of the best fighting games of all time. MVC2 is maybe my favorite fighting game of all time, so to see it return here, oh, it's incredible. This is such a good collection. Playing all of these games again was a really great time, and the Punisher beat 'em up, it's actually pretty good as well. I had never tried it up until now, and I quite enjoyed it. This collection slaps. If you're a fan of any of these fighting games, I really highly recommend it, and Capcom is just doing a great job bringing their classics back. Like, 2024 was the year of the Capcom collections and remasters. It's just been great, really from start to finish. So here we have yet another Ace Attorney game, but I promise this is the last one. After finishing Dual Destinies and Investigations 2, I decided to go back to the series past. I wanted to see where everything began, and I actually played through Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, and I gotta say, I loved it. I actually really enjoyed the first Ace Attorney. Like, this was such a good visual novel. I totally understand why people fell in love with this series. I've played through a few of these games now, and I gotta say, the original Ace Attorney is up there as one of the best. The first two cases just have so much drama and are so funny. Like, I was laughing my ass off while I was playing this. I did not want to play anything else. I got all these new games to finish and play, but man, I just wanted to play Ace Attorney. I was so hooked. The third case is pretty good. The fourth case is really good. And then the fifth case, yeah, that one was just alright for me, went on a little too long, but the first 4 cases, man, that shit is so good. Yeah, the presentation is a bit crude nowadays, but the writing and the storyline have aged so well. Like, this is a great game that I have no problem recommending. If somebody was going to get into the Ace Attorney series, I would recommend they start with this one, and don't start with Apollo Justice like me. Start with the original and see why everybody fell in love with this series. This game is so unhinged, and it was so good. The music is also like totally goated. The music is so good in this game. I love the original Ace Attorney, and in 2025, I'm going to try to play 2, 3, Spirit of Justice, and maybe even the Great Ace games. And then the last retro game I played in 2024 was the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver Remaster. I have never played any of the Legacy of Kain games, and I was really excited when I saw they were getting remastered. This was the perfect excuse for me to finally jump in, and yeah, not only did I jump in, but I actually really liked Soul Reaver as well. I haven't finished it yet, I still am playing through it, and it certainly has aged in several different areas, but man, this world is really cool. I like the aesthetic, I like the storyline, and the gameplay is actually still pretty good. It certainly is one of those games where you go, where exactly do I go now? And even though they added a map and tweaked the controls a little bit, a walkthrough's probably going to be your friend here, but I've really been enjoying my time with Soul Reaver. I have yet to try the second one since, you know, I want to actually finish the first one, but I think this is a really great remaster. This seems to be the definitive way to play these games, and I like that you can switch between the old and new graphics. The new graphics are just a straight improvement on what the original had. It looks like a PS2 game now. Like, it looks really good. I've always wanted to play through this series, and yeah, I'm finally playing through it thanks to these remasters, so that's pretty awesome. Alright, so that's all the retro games I played in 2024. There were some pretty good games here. I didn't play as many as I would have liked to have played, but I was mostly playing new games. But what retro games did you all play in 2024? I'd love to know. If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment our secret code word, which is going to be lunch, because I need to go get some lunch. I've been recording audio for a few hours now, and I'm getting pretty hungry. So I'll talk to y'all later. See ya. Bye-bye.